A few weeks ago, my sister drove by the house we grew up in, and it was gone. In her shock and surprise, she took this video and sent it to me. It was gone, not sold, not renovated, just gone. The house had been demolished, and a big, beautiful new home had been built farther back on the property. And even though I haven't lived there in decades, and even though that house held a lot of difficult memories from my childhood, I was surprised by how strange it felt, because it got me thinking about something that I feel many of us understand much more deeply as we get older. Home means something very different to us now than it used to, and I thought I'd talk about that a little bit today. Hi, I'm Susan, and welcome to the channel. The house I grew up in was on 16 acres of property in a rural area. It was built by my dad in the early 1960s using mostly salvaged material. Until then, my parents had been living with my mom's parents while Dad finished school and began working full-time, while they had 4 babies and while he built the house. It wasn't a fancy house at all. It was just a very practical, serviceable family home. 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, living room, and kitchen. At the time we moved into the house, my parents were in their mid-20s and had 4 children under the age of 5. Which honestly, just saying that out loud sounds exhausting. And I think that's part of what hit me. That house was built with hope, was built with the idea of creating a life there, a family home, a place to raise children, a place where I'm sure my parents imagined a very different kind of future than the one that actually unfolded. And I think a lot of homes begin that way, don't they? With hope and with good intentions and dreams and with people trying in whatever imperfect way to build a life. But of course, what a home is supposed to be and what it actually becomes are not always the same thing. My father became an alcoholic. It was a family trait that many of us know is difficult to overcome. And life in that house was often very tough. There were a few good memories, but there were also a lot of hard ones. And I know I'm not the only person who has complicated feelings about the place they came from. Because I think many of us, as we get older, begin to understand that a home can hold a lot of things at once: love and pain, disappointment but hope, security and instability, good memories and hard ones. And sometimes a house can be where you grew up without ever fully feeling like the safe, comforting place the word home is supposed to mean. And that's a hard thing to understand when you're younger, but I believe it comes much clearer with age. My dad passed away in 2001 at the age of 61, and the property was sold after that. None of my siblings or I were interested in buying it, even though it was a lovely country property, to be truthful. There was a lot about it that was beautiful, but it held too many difficult memories, so it made perfect sense that it was sold. I would drive by once every year or so and see how the trees had matured and grown and how the fields had grown over from what used to be Mom's horse pasture. And now, some 20 years later, hearing that the house itself is now completely gone felt strangely unsettling. Not devastating or even particularly dramatic, just very strange. Because when a place that shaped your life disappears, something very deep changes. It doesn't erase the memories, they're still there. But I have to be honest, when I found out and saw the pictures of that flat ground where our house used to sit, I did have a few minutes of wait. Then did those things actually happen? And if the house had just vaporized, then maybe those events had too? It seems like they may have taken on a different form, and I'm not even fully sure what that form is yet. I think maybe it's just one of those moments in life where you realize that the physical backdrop of your childhood, however complicated that childhood may have been, is no longer there. And that does something, even if you didn't want the house, and even if you would never have gone back. And even if your relationship to that place was anything but simple, it still mattered because it was part of your story. I think when we're younger, we often think of home as a place, a house, a location, a family setup, a picture in our minds of what life is supposed to look like. After all, it is the only life we know, whether that's safe and warm and stable or not. But life teaches us that home is often much more complicated than that. Home is where we came from, and if we're lucky, we loved it, but sometimes it's what we survived. And sometimes it's a mixture of all of those feelings. At this stage of life, I think many of us start seeing home very differently. We stop looking at it only as square footage or appearances or whether it looks impressive from the outside. And we start asking very different questions. Does it feel peaceful? Does it feel safe? Does it feel comfortable? And does it feel like a place where we can exhale? You start caring less about what a home is supposed to look like and more about how it actually feels to live in it. Maybe we're downsizing and maybe we're living alone. And maybe we're trying to make a smaller space feel like ours and rethinking everything we once believed that mattered. And maybe for the first time in our lives, we're not trying to create a home based on what other people expect or trying to create something that we may never have even had. We're trying to create a home that gives us exactly what we need now, whatever that may be. Not because we're obsessed with decorating or organizing or making everything look perfect, but because we're trying to create a feeling of ease and safety and truly belonging. And sometimes when you didn't always have that earlier in life, it means even more when you create it for yourself later. And if you wonder why is Susan always harping about peace and comfort and home so much, it's because I experienced anything but that for many years of my life. So now that I have it, I absolutely cherish it. And I want it for others as well. So yes, hearing that the house I grew up in is gone felt strange, but maybe it also reminded me of something important. Maybe home isn't always the place we came from or the place that shaped us. Maybe home becomes the place we finally create for ourselves, a place that reflects what we value now, and a place that feels serene and quiet and feels like us. And I think that means something very different in my 60s than it did when I was younger. And I don't think that's a sad thing. Maybe that's actually one of the better parts of getting older. I'd love to know if any of this resonated with you. Has your idea of home changed over the years? Does it mean something different to you now than it used to? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate you spending your time with me. Until next time, take care.